Planning Commission for the town of Chincoteague into order. I'd ask you all to stand for the invocation and the pledge of allegiance. Heavenly Father, we ask your blessing this evening. Give us your guidance. The decisions that we make, we would hope would be beneficial to all. We also ask your prayers for those that we've lost this past year. Be with their families. Bless them. Put your cloak around them. Guide them through the troubled waters that they're going through. And again, we ask for your blessing this evening and all those present. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point in time, I would open our meeting to any public participation. Mr. Landsberger.
Can you pass this to everybody? I'm going to read this, but that way you can have it for reference. I just want to enter it into the record. My name is David Landsberger. I live at 5475 Warren Street. As you know, you all received our original package and heard our presentation at your last meeting. As no action was taken by the Commission within 30 days, we presented the same information to the Town Council for their action as per statute. The Town Council has referred this matter back to you for a recommendation, and we're here today to discuss that. We have several more points to add to the discussion. First of all, I think you all have the package from before, and you all heard our presentation before. If you have any questions about it, please let us know. We have several more points to add to this discussion. We know of no good reason that classification of 4 areas in this town are R1 and the rest are other classifications. Because of this, multifamily homes are not allowed in R1 areas. While HOA rules might prohibit multifamily homes, it is not the purview of the Planning Commission to reinforce HOA rules. We know of no reason why Richardson's Landing, for example, should be in R1, but Oyster Bay should not be. Equity dictates that there be a valid reason behind the zoning requirement, and we have been provided with no such reason. We do not want to change the zoning from single-family homes to multifamily homes in R1 areas, however. We are seeking to keep single-family homes in R1 areas. What we are seeking is a change in the definition of what a single-family home is. The Commission has expressed concern that someone could use this change to put a trailer in the back of their property for a relative. Our proposal requires any detached quarter residence be built in compliance with any and all existing setbacks and codes. A trailer does not qualify under existing rules and would not be qualified by this ordinance. The Commission has also expressed concern regarding enforcement. Difficulty of enforcement is not a valid reason to not implement fair and equitable zoning. Today, it can be nearly impossible to enforce single-family zoning and to avoid the illegal internal multifamily renovations that currently exist throughout this island. The Commission is not charged with enforcement, only with drafting and recommending fair and equitable zoning ordinances. The changing landscape of our society has put 3 needs in front and center for our island. 1, children returning to their parents' home to live. 2, care of elder or ill family members. And 3, providing housing for caregivers in a community where full-time rentals are not readily available. Allowing detached quarters living could solve all 3 of these problems without any sort of detrimental effect to the community. It would provide long-term residents with options to remain on the island and allow for the care of loved ones. I strongly believe that to not implement this ordinance would be placing an unfair burden on residents and would be denying property owners of their basic property rights. The combination of unexplained differences in zoning, along with denying a homeowner the ability to build detached quarters residence for either a family member or a caregiver, could be construed as overly restricted reach by the town zoning rules that could be subject to legal challenge. You all know that I have nothing but the best interests of this island in mind with everything that I do. I think that I've proven that. And I believe that this is absolutely a must for our island, and I intend to pursue this until I can effectively get this ordinance enacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? At this time, I'll close the public participation portion of our meeting. Is closed. Next item on our agenda is the agenda review and disclosure. Any changes to the agenda or modifications?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as is.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So moved. First item on our agenda is approval of the June 8th, 2021 regular meeting minutes, which you all have before you. If there are any corrections, additions, please state them.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as is.
Do I have a motion?
I'll second.
I have a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. So moved. Second item on our agenda is review and discussion of proposed detached quarters ordinance. The only comments I would like to make initially is that at our meeting in June, we did make a recommendation, not formal, to the council, that fees be waived should there be a need. And that was made by Councilperson McComb. I guess that was not perceived as a formal
Mr.
action.
Chairman, that is on me because I did not present that at the council meeting in the correct amount of time, so that's why
Okay.
before the council is back before you.
I just wanted to clarify that, because there had been some discussion. And in lieu of that, Mr. Landsberger went before council, made the presentation that he did, and council has made the decision to return it to the planning commission for further discussion and action. So that's where, at this point in time, I think that's where we stand. Having said that, Mr. Talbot, did you want to present your portion of it, or I'll open it up for discussion to the commissioners first?
Do you want to review it?
Mark?
Well, it's kind of the same thing we were presented with the first go-around. We've got a new PowerPoint that goes to it with the additional
Right.
information that Mr. Landsberger read off tonight, clarification on the points he made.
Yeah, all the commissioners did get copies of that, so we have that, which we did not have at our June meeting. So.
I have a question concerning the comments, because I hadn't reviewed them ahead of time, these particular comments. But let me clarify. What you're now seeking is really a change in the definition of single-family residence in R1?
No, what I'm seeking is permission to build a detached quarters, to have the detached quarters ordinance as we wrote and proposed to be passed. However, during the discussion, okay, that we had, it came to light that if I were anywhere but in R1, I could build a duplex on my house, on my property, and I could have that could essentially be a detached quarter living. I could have two residences on my lot. I can't do that in an R1, and I'm not sure why. I know why I can't do it in Richardson's Landing, because my HOA says so, but I don't know why I can't do it in an R1, whereas I could do it in Oyster Bay, or in Oyster Bay 2, or in Misty Meadows, for that matter, if the HOA would permit it. So it seems to me that a solution to somebody like me would be to build a duplex. I think that's kind of an awkward way of solving the problem, but that's what your zoning would force someone like me to do right now. Whereas building a detached quarters, like I am proposing, would be certainly a lot more favorable and would be a lot easier in terms of enforcement, because if you have a duplex, eventually someone's going to rent it out, and then you're going to have to run around and double check it. But again, enforcement shouldn't be your issue, shouldn't be your concern. Go ahead. Yeah.
To clarify, I'm Chuck Ward, 2281 Rudder Court, Greenbackville, Virginia. I work with Starboard Environmental. I'm Mr. Landsberger's consultant. The absolute bare bones lowest common denominator of this presentation, of this proposal, is to allow someone to put an addition on their house that's not attached to their house, essentially. It allows for you want to add another bedroom on for a child returning home or an aging parent who needs a place to stay, but you want to give them some privacy. It's an extension of your house without it being connected to your house. Under the current building code, and I would let Mr. Bowden correct me instantly if I am wrong, if Mr. Landsberger or anyone wished to build an addition to their house and they wanted to add a bedroom, a kitchenette, a bathroom, and they attached it with a breezeway to the existing home, it's one structure. All we're asking is, let's not have the breezeway. Let's not go through this farce and this false, playing the right tune to get the building permit approved, rather than people going in and saying, well, I want to have this separate living space for an aging parent to return home or a sick family member to return home, but I want to give them their privacy. So instead of going through this issue of getting a permit and wondering if it's going to work, we hide under cover of darkness. We go in on Saturdays and Sundays, and we renovate the interior of a big home with a separate entrance for our family member to live in. This ordinance is drafted to allow people to be more open and be specific and exact about what they're doing. And it allows for that weird family dynamic that the U.S. Census Bureau was telling us that we're getting now over the last 10 or 15 years, where more and more older children are returning home, parents' children are returning home in their 20s and their 30s, parents coming back to live with their children. It's an opportunity to redevelop a property without turning it into something that it shouldn't be. It's allowing an extension of a home without building that ridiculous breezeway to connect it, essentially.
You didn't see, I know there was a concern with the fee associated with a conditional request.
No, the concern with the fee was something you guys raised. I paid $1,500 to get, because my daughter came home during COVID.
I understand.
Okay, and you said, oh, well, if it's for health, you shouldn't have had to pay that. But it's really irrelevant to me. I mean, it's done, it's over, I paid the fee. The issue isn't that. The issue is that you should allow someone to bring a daughter or a son home without them having a medical crisis and without having to come for a special use permit, even if the special use permit is free. Why if I want to bring my son home or daughter home, and I go in, as I know at least 2 people have done, close to me, and renovate the inside of my house with a separate entrance and a separate apartment and don't tell anybody, I can get away with that. But as soon as I build a legal structure for which I had a permit, and which you've seen and is certainly up to code, meets all the setbacks, all the everything, okay, in order for me to make that legal, and I've talked to Mark about that, if I string a 2x4 from one side to the other and nail them together, then it's a legal structure because they're connected. And that seems to be a little silly. When we can have attractive detached quarters that are not trailers and not mobile homes, but that are built to code and meet the need of all the returning kids and of all the elderly. There's more and more people like me who would like to stay on this island as I get older, and I'm wondering how I'm going to do it if I can't have someone living there to take care of me.
And that's part of the thing that I wrestled with. That's part of what I've wrestled with, because I went through the ordinance. I actually dissected the proposed ordinance and played it against the existing ordinance. And I'm fully sympathetic to the need. Believe me, I'm very sympathetic to the need. But the implementation has to be fair and equitable to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, not everyone could afford to go through and build a $70,000 detached quarters.
That's true.
But they may still have the same need, and a trailer in that case may be what they can afford.
Well, if you want to make some kind of an ordinance and some kind of accommodation for low-priced housing somewhere on the island, I'll be there to support you. And if you want to make an additional ordinance to allow people to have a caregiver live in a trailer, I'll probably support that also. But what I'm trying to get done is that there are more and more people who are coming here and building homes that cost a reasonable amount of money, and to be honest with you, even the smaller homes are now costing more money, and they should have the right to use their property. And that's what's being denied. If I have enough acreage and enough space to meet the setbacks, why should I be denied the right to build a bedroom in addition to my house simply because it's not connected? I believe that you're denying people the right to use their property appropriately. Do I think that everybody can afford it? No. If you want to come up with a thing where someone can have a trailer in there, I'm all for it. I'm right there with you. I will support you 100%.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know?
because actually I have a number of comments on the proposed ordinance. But, you know, what it really comes down to, I agree with you. When I went through and looked at everything, to me it came down to an R1, R2 problem. I think R3, R4, C1 through C4 all have the capability to go through and do it, right? However,
Maybe. I don't know.
Well-
I don't know the fine points, but I know that if I was in an
Well,
R4,
there-
I could do it.
there's a little bit of discussion on the text of the eligibility, but
There is one caveat to what you just said about R1, R2 being different. R3, R4, it doesn't matter where it is. The Virginia Building Code, or the building code, the zoning code right now not the building code, the zoning code would require that if you have a home in the R3 and you wanted to build a detached structure with a kitchenette and a bathroom and a bedroom in it, that would be considered a separate dwelling unit. It cannot be part of the principal unit.
and
So-
should I
and
call it a
that's-
vacation cottage?
It can be called that, but then it is still considered by the code, by the zoning code, it would have to be considered a separate, dwelling unit, because it has to be part of, each unit is standalone, and this ordinance basically allows you to build a detached addition to your house.
It could be
Detached.
attached or detached for uses of it. So you
And-
could do a
and-
duplex or a.
Correct, in the R3 and R4, but if you just wanted to put in an addition that wasn't connected to the principal structure, it would have to meet building code of a standalone structure. It'd have to stand alone as its own
Yeah,
structure. It
correct,
wouldn't be
yeah.
considered an addition. So it would have to meet the minimum square footage and all that.
Which is minimum code of Virginia.
Right, which is 600?
No, there's no square footage on code of Virginia. It says it's got, each room's got to be 170 square feet, and there's really no
Right.
minimum square footage
Okay.
on it.
Okay.
USPC.
And the health department approval.
Yeah, health
That would be
department.
separate.
So do these detached units, should they require the same parking and requirements? So on these detached quarters, I didn't see something where it says for parking and sewage them down, so if we got one bedroom, two bedrooms, and they're parking, you still got to have the parking and
Right.
sewage.
The way that this ordinance did not address parking specifically, I didn't go in and try to amend the parking section of the ordinance. What it does say, I believe, and I don't have it right in front of me, is that any parking areas that would be required, you know, because you were building that, if you wanted to increase your parking area, then it would, obviously that would go through zoning approval. But the concept here is that, for example, and let's use Mr. Landsberger's case, for example, you know, he didn't have to increase parking to do what he was doing because he had a daughter come home and she had one car and there's one extra car. And a lot of the cases where detached quarters are going to be needed, it's quite likely that the person who needs that detached quarters is not driving an automobile, so they're not going to need parking. They're going to be, you know, small, less than 50% of the size of the principal structure, so you're not looking at something that would likely be inhabited in most cases by 2 or more people. So in most cases, you're looking at the likelihood of it being at most a 1-car requirement. But because in these cases, this wouldn't be a rental property, it wouldn't be, this wouldn't be put on a structure where the principal structure is a weekly rental that needs 7 or 8 parking spaces for all the people that are piling in there during the week, and then you need another one for the detached quarters. This is for the use of the resident of that principal structure for their caregiver, for their family member, or their children who are going to be staying there. So essentially, we're not talking about something here where the whole design of this wouldn't create a demand for parking. It
Yeah,
would-
but you cannot make that assumption, Chuck.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely, you can based on the size of the structure.
If you take it,
But if you look
if you
at-
take it as a separate structure, which is what you're saying, it's a detached structure, but it's co-ed with the primary structure, you still should apply the same parking requirements.
I
As you
have,
do
I have
to the
no
original
problem to
structure.
you adding a parking requirement if you
I
want.
mean.
Yeah, because, yeah, it's correct. And,
You have a very difficult situation on this island with parking already. you know?
right, I understand that completely.
I mean, you don't
And the lot size requirement, would obviously
Exactly.
create a situation where someone's applying for this, has a larger lot where one extra parking space or even two probably wouldn't be an issue.
It has to comply with the setbacks, so you need 25 feet from the front. and-
Depend upon.
Depends on where you're located at.
Yeah.
Well, if you're building a structure if you're building a
And in
structure.
R3, you're 25, 25, 10, and 10.
And well, I'm in an R4, 25, 10, 10, and 10. I think within that setback, there's certainly no room to park a car,
Certainly.
if not two.
And these detached structures, as you recall
Well,
from
you were
the
R1, I
draft.
think.
Huh?
You were all pretty much.
I was all-
You were R1.
I don't know, but I.
Yeah, you were all.
Yeah, and the detached structures ordinance as proposed has the detached quarters cannot be any closer to the street. It cannot exceed wherever the front of that property is, wherever the principal structure is now, it can't go beyond that front. So we're not looking at having taking up parking space in front of a property with a detached quarters proposal.
I have a question, or I have something. You're talking about HOAs. I live in a R1 area. There's no HOA, whatever. But I'm deeded what I can have. I can have a detached garage, and I can have a
Zoning commission to enforce the restrictions and covenants that go with your deed.
Do you all plan to, okay, you're suggesting I'm going to call it a cottage, okay?
Okay.
How large is this cottage? Is it going to be
The ord-
200 feet, or is it going to be half the size of the residence that it,
Right now, as proposed, it's 50% or less of the size of the principal structure on the
So
property.
in other words, you can have a home that is 4,000 square feet, and a little cottage can be 2,000 square feet.
Certainly, and by proportion, that's how it would work out. This is a proposal. This is, I don't think Mr. Landsberger is going to, stand on the hill and demand 50%. I mean, the commission certainly has, these things are presented as an offering to discuss and propose. And if the commission sees fit to say the maximum size should be blank, I don't think that Mr. Landsberger is going to, argue that point. And certainly, it's the commission's recommendation. So,
Well, you do realize that most of the lots on this island would not have enough property in the backyard to put it,
Most of
most of them, especially in the town
I
area.
would say a
Right.
significant number of the properties on this island could not accommodate the
Would not.
detached.
certainly, and the ones that could not
That's correct.
accommodate it certainly don't need to be more developed because the lots are already very small. So in those cases, if you wanted to do this, then you would have to, buy a property that was large enough to meet the
Or
requirement.
you might do it with a detached structure.
Or you could attach, yes, and in the town, as you get closer into the town, you're not talking about, the larger zoning, you're talking about the R3 and R4, where the lots are much smaller, and you can have a second, if you're able to do it with if everything else works, you are able to have, a second dwelling unit on
And
that
there are
property.
people, for instance, who finish their garages and bring them up to code and turn them into a little apartment to a spare bedroom. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with anybody in any lot adding on to their house. What I have a problem with is if someone says, I can't build another bedroom unless I attach it to my house. That's my problem.
No, they're not
It's
saying
not
that.
that.
They're saying if you want to do that, you should ask for a permit. That's all they're asking.
No, I can't build a
If you meet building requirements,
no, I cannot.
Conditional use permit.
especially.
In R1.
No, the special use permit is not to do that. The special use permit is only for my daughter
Right.
If I have my son, I can't do it. I have to come for another special use permit.
Yeah, and the special use permits have no,
That's the conditional use, that was special.
Mr. Talbot?
I just would like to point out one thing. I've been here a little over a year, and in a little over a year, we've had 5 lot vacations before council, and they've all been approved. So even though there is a higher density, there are many higher density areas on the island, we've seen 5 lot vacations in the last year from people expanding 2 or 3 smaller lots. In one case, it was 3 smaller lots into a much larger lot where this could be done. So you could potentially, I just want to point out that you could potentially have this situation in just about any area of the island where there's an open space.
By the way,
The lines could be vacated. You could even vacate the lines of a lot with an existing house and a vacant lot next door to it. So any lot can be made large enough, and then so the potential exists to have this anywhere. It's permitted within the zoning code, and that's how the planning commission should look at it.
by the way, okay, my detached quarter was a separate lot. Before I built on it, I vacated the property
Yeah.
line and turned it in. If I had not vacated the property line,
Exactly.
I
You
could
could
have
not have
done
built
this.
that property. Yeah.
I
So
know-
That was
I could
understood
also
at the
come
time.
before
Yeah.
It's a
the
two-edged sword.
council and ask to unvacate the line, and I would
I-
solve my problem, but that seems a little
Yeah.
silly.
I noticed that when I looked at a map and I said, that's another lot.
Yeah, but the property
So you
line
did
has-
vacate it?
It has been vacated.
Okay.
and I think along those lines, there's one thing very important to remember, that the permits that are issued by the council, currently the one that Mr. Landsberger applied for, there's no standards. There's no standards by which those are judged. It's, Mr. Landsberger walks in and he presents his case, and the town council has the authority to approve or deny anything that comes in front of them. And that approval is totally based on which 7 people happen to be sitting here and how they feel about that particular proposal. This ordinance was drafted in the hopes that, at the very least, there becomes a standard by which such things can be judged. Because right now, there's no way that anyone could possibly know when they get ready to spend their $1,500, they can't go through a checklist with Mark or Mr. Tolbert and sit down and say, okay, well, I meet all of these things. I'm pretty much convinced that my $1,500 is going to help me get what I want. Right now, it's pay your $1,500 and hope that your presentation tugs at enough heartstrings to get it approved. This is something to try to create a standard.
And
Okay, Chuck.
both Chuck and I sit on the BZA.
I did.
And we
And
have,
he no longer sits there.
No longer. I
You
still-
still
I
do,
still
but he
Chuck
does not.
and I can't tell you the number of people who have built little cottages or little homes, or homes that are not conforming to the setbacks, or not conforming to the size, and because they do tug at the heartstrings, and because essentially the BZA is there to, we exist to give exceptions, otherwise we wouldn't have a BZA. Normally, they get them without going, but that does cost them, how much, $200?
And I'd like to point out, there is a standard for the BZA. There is a code
Yes.
that the BZA should follow.
Absolutely.
And the BZA is appointed by the circuit court, not by the council, so we have very little control over that.
Right, the BZA does have.
And they're supposed to have a hardship.
There was an easing of some of the restrictions when you talked about financial impact, et cetera.
Right.
Recently, the state code was modified,
Yes.
but that didn't open the door for everything.
But for the council approved permits, there is no
Right.
standard by which you judge those.
Okay, I have another thing. It's me. I'm usually quiet. Here on the 4th part that you have here, detached quarters shall meet residential building code requirements with respect to ventilation, which I hope it does. Natural light, you need it. And ingress and egress. In other words, you're gonna have a way to get in and get out. Electrical safety, I hope they have that. Plumbing and livability standards. Does it meet floodplain elevation?
That's required by the building permit.
That's got to be,
The building code would require that.
was required, okay. And with electric, will it have its own meter box?
The,
No,
It would be required to,
Huh?
the electric company will require it.
that's what I thought, okay. And the septic system, most homes are built with, like if they're gonna have 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms, and that's what the septic is, what they normally get when you add this cottage, and that's another bedroom, do they have to have their own septic?
Oh, certainly, your
Okay.
building inspector isn't going to issue a permit without health department approval.
Okay. Let me see if there's anything else running around here. Oh. Okay, then, we had an area, we said that it could be 50%, and as much as 50%. Let me see, I lost my paper. But I have a little thing here, too. When you do this, it can add to the value between 25 and 34% to the value of your land, and to the proper, okay, that's the assessed value, and 51% to the increased resale value.
Certainly. I
They're
assume
gonna
it would.
be, okay. How do we know that these are not going to be rentals? I mean, if it's for a person, no.
Okay.
We won't know.
Mr. Landsberger, could you step to the microphone, because we'll have a job hearing this on when we transcribe the minutes.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Again, I understand your question. How do you know that I'm not currently renting my house to 32 people?
Well, to begin with, if they come with cars, I'll definitely know, because there were some this past weekend that were well overdue.
Okay, but the code and the zoning, okay, the enforcement of that is not the purview of the zoning. Okay, I understand that you know, who's to stop these people who have now taken, I know of one home where they built an apartment inside for their parents. There's a separate entrance, it's within there. How do I know they're not renting that out? I don't, you don't.
There is a place up there in Richardson's Landing that has
There is.
right at the end of a road that has a lot of stuff there.
There's more than one in Richardson's Landing that
I know,
has
but
one.
this one I happened to
Okay,
notice.
well, I know of one in Richardson that's very tastefully done, and you wouldn't notice it. How do we know that they're not renting it out?
I know, I understand, but where you're coming from. You don't know what you can't see.
Exactly. And so, but that shouldn't, because you're worried about what you can't see and what you can't enforce, shouldn't deny a property owner the right to use their property.
What if the person has this little cottage, and the next door neighbor notices,
Uh-huh.
hey, this one's there, who do they complain to?
Well, I don't know, they did it to me, and they did a pretty good job with me, and I got turned in because my daughter was living there, so someone obviously notices.
I just, there's a.
But again, the fact that, you know, my gut is that if someone has a detached quarters, they should sign an agreement with the town, and then when the property changes hands, that should be an automatic trigger for the town to notify them, by the way, this cottage is not for rental, and if it is rented, you will be out of code or breaking the law, or however you want to word it. And I think that could be a fairly easy thing. If someone applies to the building, for a building permit for a detached quarter, we'll have a record of it. And, you know, the building inspector, not to give you more work to do, can drive around, and if he sees a different car in front of it every day, he should probably ask a question. Just as if he drives by my house and he sees 20 cars in front of it every week, and they're different cars every week, he should ask a question.
Unfortunately, that's the history of our rental. There is no real good enforcement process in place.
No.
It is strictly by complaint at this
Okay.
point in time, because the agents don't.
Yeah, but
accept the
again, that's not a
responsibility.
zoning issue.
Yeah, but
The enforcement should not be part of the zoning issue.
But on item 3, where basically you're doing a quid pro quo with the hired help. So if they're staying in this abode, maybe there's not a bill that's sent or a lease that's signed, but basically it's compensation to them. So it's the rent.
There's
You know, it's a rental.
there's three people I'm trying to serve, okay? One is children, one is, well, any relative, so 2 people, a relative or a parent, okay? And the other would be to allow people to age in place. If you decide that, okay, you shouldn't be allowed to have your hired help live with you. And by the way, there's nothing to stop me from having a hired help living in my house for a quid pro quo. And again, all we're asking is to be able to build a bedroom that's not attached. So I can have that, I can move my elderly mother out to the detached and let the hired help live in my house if you think that's better.
You know, actually, I like those options, but, and you can't do it in other zones, right?
No, I can't build a detached quarter.
No, but you could go through and have the hired help stay in your house,
I could buy another house,
or have them stay in your house.
or I could have them stay in my house, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I'm trying to ratchet down to get a real clear picture as to what we're actually asking for here. Again, going through this, I saw it as an R1, R2 problem.
Chuck, is this an R1, R2 problem? Because in R3, I can build a cottage. And in R4, I can build a
You
cottage.
can have multifamily in the R4.
Okay, then maybe it's an R1, R2 problem.
Okay, so, and then, you know, we kind of discuss whether it's like a full living unit or just a bedroom, bathroom unit. So we need to make the distinction between that. If it's a full living unit, that's fine. But, you know, we should say it's a full living unit.
Well, in my presentation, the unit I have is a full living unit, but it's about 300 square feet. You know, it's.
Can you conceive of building a bedroom over here? Standalone bedroom? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Bedroom with a bathroom? Yeah, I can. If you've got an elderly relative who's not mobile and you're going to bring them all their meals anyway, okay. In my particular instance, there's a small, like a kitchenette there. There's a one room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. That's all there is there.
See, to me, if I may, I've been in construction for a long time, and a bedroom is another room of the structure, right? So if it's detached, and it has a kitchen, and it has a bathroom, I don't kind of see how it's a bedroom. And if it's a special need, right, which is what we're talking about, what happens when that need is no longer there and the property wants to be sold? The owner needs to sell property. Is there some kind of, like, you have to padlock the other structure? I mean,
Yeah, I understand but again, let's go back to what I have right now. If I, and I've asked Mark this, and I may do this. If I connect my two buildings with a breezeway, it's completely legal. Because it's one structure.
yeah.
And that seems to be, and in fact, there's a house, where is that house that we had the picture of? On Hancock? Cape Charles. In Cape Charles, there's a picture of a house in Cape Charles that was built that way. There's actually a fence with a door in it and a phony roof on it, connecting one building to the other, for this very reason. I understand what you're saying, and different people will build different things. But if I wanted to build a bedroom with a small kitchenette and a bathroom and attach it to my house, and I had enough room, and I had the septic, and I had the setback, and I had the electrical, it's completely legal. The only thing that's illegal is that if it's 1 foot away from my house, it's illegal, because it's
Yeah,
detached.
Okay, I guess that's where I get confused, because the breezeway thing looks to me like an easy go-round, you know,
I suppose it is, but why would you force
Plus,
someone to do that?
whoever has to go back and forth isn't gonna get wet. You know what I mean? It's just, I think, you know, to me, the breezeway is a good solution, because then you can have the separate, but we're still letting you do it, you know what I mean?
I think that the zoning commission shouldn't be giving people workarounds. They should be planning to meet the needs of the population. And if we have an ordinance that meets that need and that doesn't deny the people the use of their property in what I believe to be a legal way, that you should consider it.
Yeah. What's the limiter on the number of detached quarters that can be put on a lot?
That would be up to you, wouldn't it?
Okay, because it wasn't specified in the proposal.
I mean, if you have a 5-acre lot, I don't know, but there aren't many 5-acre lots on the island. I'm building a house now on a 1.6-acre lot. I suppose I could put 4 or 5 cottages there because it's not in an R1. And there are cottages, I mean, we know there are a lot of cottages around the island where people are living.
A lot of them were established long before we incorporated.
That's correct, and their grandfather.
Yeah. Their grandfather.
And some of them have just been redone within the last year and a half and brought up to code.
I know there's a need for this, but at the same time, I think we need to protect the people living in the R1 districts, you know, so.
I agree. And if you want to, we said 50%. If you want to say no bigger than 1,000 feet or no bigger than a footprint of, that's up to you guys to come up with the restrictions that you feel will protect the neighborhoods. Okay? Why R1 and R2 are different from R3, I'm not exactly sure.
What's the difference though, David? If I say, okay, 600 square feet is the maximum you can build.
Right.
I've taken away the right to build it 1,000 square feet.
It is. It is. And if I have enough property to build at 1,000 square feet, if I wanted to build a...
But I'm saying, if we make a recommendation that 600 square feet is the largest single structure you have, I've denied you the right to build it 1,000 square feet.
That's correct.
So, it's like quid pro quo.
Right now, you're denying them to do anything.
Right now we're denied to do anything.
Correct.
So,
In R1 and R2.
yeah.
Well, in a way, I live in R1, and you're encroaching on me because we don't want it.
Well,
Our neighborhood would not want
okay,
it.
well, if the neighborhood doesn't want it, that's not a zoning issue.
No, it's not a zoning issue.
Well,
but
this is a zoning...
when you
yeah.
get this all planned that it can be done in R1, somebody's going to come in and say, I'm in R1 and I can have it.
Yes, except by covenant and restrictions, you can't have it where you are.
Part of an application to the zoning board is contact with the neighbors.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a requirement, is it not?
Yes, but someone on the zoning board saying, I don't want it in my backyard, wouldn't be the reason to not, to deny a zoning ordinance.
Well, that would be the zoning board's prerogative to
Yeah, I
decide
suppose.
that, but part of the requirement is to contact the neighbors.
Yes, yeah. Well, and before you get a building permit,
And
you have to contact all the neighbors and ask if anybody has any objections. Yeah. And if they have an objection because of the covenants and restrictions, then that should be raised. And by the way, I don't think that my detached quarter is in an R1, by the way. When I vacated the property line, I guess it got sucked into the R1, unless my lot gets sucked into the R4.
Well, it would go to, if one was the R1, one was the R2, it would go to motion restricted if it vacated lot line.
Okay. Because where I built it was not in part of, not of the R1.
R1, R2, R3, and R4, so
Mhm.
you're most restricted if you R1, so that's
Right.
where you got your more living space, or people
Right.
feel comfortable living, they got more area,
Right.
they got less, people can build closer to them, that's why it's a more restricted area. R2 is a little bit lesser, that you a little less square footage need, so you have less protection around you. You get R3, then it's a little bit lesser.
Mhm.
So, and one thing you talk about detached bedroom, that's a detached quarter. And then when you talk about adding a bathroom and spaces for eating,
Well,
cooking and stuff.
I'm not going to let my elderly
But
mothers.
then it gets into a ADU, accessory building.
Yes, yeah,
Instead of a
Yeah.
detached quarter.
yeah. And you have to have the septic, and you have to have all of that.
Right. So, I
And
mean,
in my instance, it did.
so basically, the detached quarter, is it a detached quarter or is it a accessory dwelling unit?
According to the Virginia Building Code, it's an accessory dwelling unit.
Right.
But the town zoning code doesn't currently have any reference to accessory dwelling units or anything like that.
Right. But even as a detached quarter, if you provide the things for eating, living, cooking, sleeping, it still will meet the definition of ADU.
Correct. And the idea is that if someone wanted to add this, if someone wanted to create this living space for a family member, the concept of this is that we want a building inspector to look at these plans. We want to make sure there's safe means of ingress and egress, or at least emergency egress especially, rather than having someone create this thing in an existing space. When it was mentioned earlier about, why can't you just put the bedroom and the kitchenette and the bathroom, attach it to your house? Well, if you did that and you have a separate entrance coming into that, when you review that plan, you've got to make sure that the people in that space have safe means of egress in the event of an emergency. So, then you put an addition on your house with 2 separate doors, and
It creates 2 separate units, so you have the firewall, you have egress,
Right.
and everything that comes through there.
Chuck, I have 4 separate doors in my home for access and egress.
that's great.
It's a single family dwelling, the numbers of doors are irrelevant,
Their number of doors are very relevant.
Well, from the standpoint of, I believe the state code provides an ADU ability that you can bring in a modular unit as needed.
They were above all suites back then, I think they were.
Yeah.
But they go, I said that in the presentation, they go by a lot of different names. Accessory dwelling, we were trying to create something somewhat unique for Shingatig with this, and decided on the term detached quarters. We're not married to the name, we don't care what it's called. Obviously, but whether or not the state building code allows for this is irrelevant if the zoning code doesn't, because there is something in the state building code about accessory dwelling units, but if it doesn't apply to the zoning in the town, then Mark obviously has no ability to review that
It is
plan.
defined in the state code, but it's prohibited by our town.
So I guess the question I asked, what's the difference between the R1 and R2 is, the R1 and R2 are more restrictive, so to get people who buy these developments to have more space and open space around them.
That was the original intent.
And there's a great concept there for the commission to tweak this ordinance recommendation and look at the square footage of the lots that we've proposed. Do they need to be larger lots? Does there need to be landscaping? Does there need to be certain architectural features of these things that they're designed in a certain way so as not to create, we're not asking for any changes to the setbacks. The side yard and rear yard setbacks, generally, we're looking at the exact same setbacks as a principal structure. A lot of houses are built where there's a 25-foot front yard setback. The front of the house might be 40 or 50 feet back. We're proposing that you can't build that accessory unit any closer to the street than the existing principal structure is. So we're not looking at any additional encroachment, but that's another thing that's under the commission's purview to make the recommendation on. Should the lots be larger than what we proposed? Should there be landscaping requirements? I know at one point it was mentioned, when we made this presentation the first time, it was mentioned about architectural guidelines. I think Ms. Cherrick said, we don't have any architectural guidelines. Well, here's a great project to start on to say if this gets a recommendation.
You want this done in the near future? I'm not being facetious, I'm just saying.
It's been talked
You're
about.
asking for a total rewrite of the zoning.
Well, it's been, the landscape, architectural guidelines have been talked about for 15 years. I'm just saying this is one small attempt to say, you can tweak some architectural guidelines for these things as well. It's completely within your purview to add or subtract anything from this. So it's a great discussion to have.
Oh, yeah, and you're correct. In going through this, I came up with a number of recommended changes to the proposed ordinance. Because the way it's currently written, I can put a detached quarters in R2 on a smaller lot than I could put a duplex. Right. And as I mentioned, I didn't see any governor on, except for septic, on the number of detached quarters that could be placed in R1. And there needs to be something there. But even with that, I still have a lot of questions. And I read just we probably read just about the same documentation, David, because I see you reference it, and so you know what I've read. And the thing that I'm wrestling with is if we're going to go through and allow this, we need to make it equitable to all the zones. So it can't be a rich man's little place. And so, you know, with that comes the questions, oh, excuse me. With that comes the questions like, if we allow like limited occupations in R1 and limited home occupations and like home occupations in R2, why couldn't this unit be used to house, I probably could use it, to house a home occupation if the kids or grandma aren't there? Home occupation.
Like a job? I don't understand what
They can run a business from their house.
Yeah, in-home business. And there's restrictions on it. It's
Well,
defined in the
I
ordinance.
believe that's covered, how running a home business is covered by other things in the town code.
Yeah, it's in the ordinance.
Yeah.
And it's actually a use by right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So then you agree that this detached quarters could be used for home occupation?
Not the way I envisioned it. I mean, again, I wrote an ordinance that very specifically says for a relative or for a caregiver. That's what the ordinance says. So my answer would be no. If the ordinance says it's for a relative or a caregiver, then no, you can't run a home business out of it.
You've raised the issue on the enforcement, and I can understand where you're coming from on that. But I do think it's the planning commission's responsibility to provide advice to the council and say, you know, there could be issues with enforcement of this, which will end up in your shop, namely the council shop. So, I mean, it's not that we want to.
There's nothing in the code right now
I agree.
that prevents me from building a detached structure in R1 or R2 to run a business out of. In fact, I did it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
But
So
that has nothing
why
to do with
restrict it
this.
in the detached quarters?
Okay. It has nothing to do with this. I mean, I can do that now.
I know, but why do you preclude it in the proposed ordinance for the detached quarter?
I think I can address that. The idea of the detached quarters is to present an application, should the ordinance get adopted, generally as written. A person would walk in and talk to your zoning administrator and say, I want to build a detached quarters for whatever purpose. You don't even have to say the purpose. I'm just building a detached quarters, and I'm going to sign this paper. I'm going to conform to all the regulations. Well, at some point, unfortunately, in some of these cases where perhaps an aging parent comes back to live in the detached quarters that you've built and spent $70,000 on, they move in, and unfortunately, there will come a time when there's no longer that need because that aging family member is no longer with us. Well, the owner of the owner of that property still owns the home. He still owns the detached quarters, and if he has a home occupation, there is no reason why he can't use that for his home occupation. If he's carving ducks, or if she's sewing things and selling them on Etsy or on eBay or whatever. So once that use isn't, once the resident of the principal structure is the sole occupant of the property, the sole resident of the property anyway, of course he could use that detached quarters for
And I
another
thoroughly
purpose.
agree with what you're saying. My point was that it's in conflict with the proposed ordinance.
I don't see a conflict.
Doesn't include it. In fact, right now, I built an office. And then I took part of that office and turned it into a detached quarter.
Mhm.
So
You did the reverse.
I did the reverse. But again, you know, that's something that you guys should consider, and I have got no objection to it going either way. If you've got enough land that you can meet the code, and you can meet the septic, and you can meet all the building codes, why shouldn't you be allowed to do either?
Yeah, I think I saw that restriction on home application under section 6.17.1, the applicability section.
Yeah, but the use of a detached building as a home office is covered elsewhere in the zoning code, isn't it?
Let me read the last part here, if I can manage it. Shall be limited to the restrictions described below and shall not be used as a separate family residence, rental unit, place of business, or any other use not described herein.
Well, I can strike out the last part of the paragraph, I'd be fine with that. I mean,
That
we're
works
not-
for me.
I'm certainly not the expert on writing ordinances. I hired someone who knew how to write ordinances. He gave you a framework to work with. I would hope that you guys would make it your own and put your own stamp on it and make it more applicable to what you believe Chincoteague should have. That's fine with me. I'm not trying to restrict anything for anybody from doing anything. And it should be done equitably, obviously.
Anything else? Steve? Mike? No? I think what we had here is a pretty open discussion. You've heard some of our concerns, if you will. You've voiced certainly your opinions and the direction you'd like to see this go. I think we have some work to do. This is not something we're going to decide this evening. So, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but because of job demand, Mr. Bowden and Mr. Pollitt and the commission will have to be devoting some effort to this. And, so unless there's anything more you want to share with us at this point in time, I would like to say thank you for your input.
Thank you.
You certainly have laid out a comprehensive, well thought out proposal. Now, whether we agree with you or not, or we modify it in whatever way, I hope you would take it as we're looking out for the best of all interests. And again, I would not make a commitment to you that we will have this done for you next month, but we will certainly make every effort to facilitate getting this completed and make some progress.
And if I can address what you just said, Mr. Landsberger wanted to have this prepared, and rather than walking into a mayor and council meeting and banging a hand on the gavel or banging a hand on the podium and saying you need to do this, you need to do this, and they all point their fingers at your two staff people here to do all this work, Mr. Landsberger said, I'll take that off their hands and give you something to work with, give you a foundation to build on. So I really appreciate your time in considering it, and hopefully we've at least helped smooth the path somewhat for your staff people to take a look at this.
There was a time when we had the facility and the expertise of a planner that expedited many of these kinds of issues very effectively. You're leaving it in the hands of a bunch of lay people with some experience, not a lot, but willingness to participate in it. So unfortunately, our two staff folks over here are going to bear a lot of the brunt of it. So
Well,
They can call
two
me
staff
now.
people aren't lay people, so we've got some experience in this.
Bob, if you want to go over some of your proposed changes with me or with
Yeah.
Chuck, I'd be happy to sit down and
why
talk
don't
to
you
you.
give them a call?
Anytime
Sure,
you want.
you could have, well, it's not a great print job, and you need a loop to read
Why
through the
don't
text.
you send me an
But-
email and I'll share it with
Okay, sure enough.
with Chuck, and we'll have an email discussion about it if you want.
But in going through this analysis, I have to reiterate what Ray said. I mean, the proposal was great. I mean, I always like having something prepared to walk in and say here, and then people rip it apart and you're a whole lot better for it, right? That's really the way to do stuff. And the proof of the pudding was that I was able to go through and build a matrix for myself of your proposed ordinance versus the code of the text of the ordinance. And so, yeah, it did, and it points up some nice considerations that, it's, and to go through and fully address those considerations really needed a clear understanding of exactly what you were looking for. Because ADUs in general is pretty broad. right? And there's a lot of rationale for ADUs, but there's a lot of risk if you're doing them by right. And so really need to go through and really hone down on exactly what this problem was, and to try to get a handle on it. But still, even with that, I think we do need more input from the community to help guide us in making some of these recommendations. I mean, right now I could come up with some recommendations, but, you know, I live in R3, right? So, you know, R1's a different world. And so.
I think we want to make sure that there is no impact on 3 and 4 either.
Yeah.
We certainly had 1 or 2, but we want to make sure that the equity is there for all.
Yeah.
I'm willing to work with any of you to help define what you want to define and just get to what I think is the fundamental problem with dealing with elderly people, family members, and caregivers, which is, that's my concern. If we can figure out a way to deal with that, I'd be happy.
Mike or Mark?
We're here to do whatever you need us to do.
We
We
good?
will start researching this tomorrow.
Okay.
I have a list.
Okay, for the purposes of our meeting this evening, I'll close out this item on our agenda. And,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you all. Item number 3, commission member announcements or comments?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Never better. Mike, Mark? We'll entertain a motion to adjourn?
Well, before we do, I'm sorry, I should have said something.
Okay.
Are we giving council recommendation?
No, we have no recommendation to make at this time. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a little bit of work to do here
Okay.
to come up with a proposal that we see, that we all concur with, that we can then forward to council. I
Okay.
don't believe we're under any obligation to respond to council in any specific time frame.
No, sir, you're not.
I was concerned about that
A
because,
proposal has been made. I will report to council what the action of the planning commission has been, that is tabled for the matter for a time of study. And just so I can clear, it's just we can be clearer between the commission and Mark and myself, it is my intention that Mark and I will sit down and we will review the proposal. We will outline every single issue we see that the commission needs to address or to review, and we'll bring it to you at the next meeting. That
no, under prior circumstances, if we had made a formal presentation to council, and council rejected it and sent it back to us, then there was some time requirements.
well, it's been addressed, and I think the issue in the last, and I told the council last time, I said, this is on me. If I had simply gone to the council and said the recommendation of the planning commission is to reduce or eliminate the cost of a conditional use permit, and that is their response to the proposal that was made, it would have been done. I mean, Mr. Landsberger would have come back and represented it, but it wouldn't have gone to the council for presentation.
Actually, I think it worked out best that way we've been. the way
And
we've been.
I think the council properly sent it back to the planning commission for study, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Motion, second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank